Howdy y'all. So this is my 2019 Honda Africa Twin, non-DCT, non-adventure sports. And I've had these SRC Moto crash bars for several months and several thousand miles now. And I've dropped the bike a few times on them minorly, and I've had one serious off with them, which I'll get to later. But I just wanted to give you guys a little overview of how I feel about the bars so far. To begin with, the installation was not too bad. You know, you have to do a little bit of manhandling, but that's pretty par for the course when it comes to these steel crash bars. Also, the instructions were not the greatest. Some of the wording and some of the pictograms they give you don't really line up necessarily with what actually needs to happen, but if you're kind of a technical or handy guy, you can figure out what needs to happen. And in particular, this one piece down here, this bracket where it connects into the frame there with those two bolts, in the instructions they give you two bolts for that, and they want you to put those bolts in coming this way. However, as you can see, due to the space in there, that's impossible. The only way that these bolts come out is coming this way. And the factory bolts from Honda that are in the frame there, when you slide this bracket over them, and also to mention that this bracket simply slides over there, it is not like holes through that bracket, it just slides over the top of those bolts and they clamp down on it. So it has a tendency to shift sometimes under really hard drops, but it's not that bad and it's relatively easily fixable. But anyway, so the factory bolts that Honda puts in there, when you slide the bracket over them, they don't actually have the length to bite those nuts in the back there enough to really give me confidence. So I contacted SRC Moto about that, and they sent me some longer bolts, which I appreciate. But just so you know, there's no way that you can take those bolts out factory or whatever without removing the exhaust system. Now, I happen to be doing a full exhaust anyway, so when I did that, I just changed out those bolts, but that's something to be aware of. Moving forward, that's pretty much the only things I don't like about, also these two fasteners here, they come from SRC, just stainless, shiny fasteners. And to me, on a black set of bars, I would like those to be black to sort of match with it. Otherwise, they stick out a lot. So I just sort of painted them with the black enamel kind of sloppily, but it works for me. But yeah, there's not much to really dislike about the bars. That was pretty much it. The install and those fasteners and that one bracket piece. Moving forward to what I do like, I really like the finish on them. It's a really nice looking, I don't know if it's a powder coat, but it's some type of matte or satin black finish, and it holds up pretty well. The only times it's ever gotten scratched was literally on rocks, and it's still not that bad. So I like the finish, and I also like the look in general of the bars. I think it's pretty clean, doesn't look too much like scaffolding. But it still gives a lot of protection for the bike. In addition to that, I would compare these mostly to the Outback Moto Trek bars, which everyone seems to like. But I'm not an engineer, but to me, I feel like these bars are a little more stout. They're both about 1 inch in diameter steel tubing, but this SRC Moto steel is a few millimeters thicker. They're using 1 inch tubing with 1/8 in thickness. And I think, if I recall correctly, the Outback ones are a few millimeters less thick than that. Also, the way that the Outback bars tie up in the center here is not as stout. They use like a flat steel bar instead of the tubes coming all the way to here that connects to the tubes about there. And it's just like a bolt through the steel bar and into the tube, which to me seems like it was shear. But the way SRC does it is this super thick steel bracket going up there. As you can see, those two bolts. And then both the tubes butt into that, and there's like a little piece sticking out. So that is not going anywhere at all in terms of side to side. Also, I really like how on these bars, they have this like double section right here. And I use that with these T-Rex highway pegs because it allows me to both attach it up here and put a bolt up against it down there, which means that they don't twist in like many other highway pegs do, especially even these when you don't have that like that. They'll always twist in. So I really like being able to do that because now these are rock solid. And what I do is whenever I'm, hitting the dirt pretty seriously, I'll just take these off because it's just these 2 bolts, and boom, take them off, and you don't have to worry about them breaking. The highway pegs, that is, not the bars. Anyway, so getting to the drops I've had, like I said, I've had a few minor ones and basically no damage from those, but I had one pretty serious one somewhat recently out at Big Bend National Park on Black Gap Road, and I have some pictures of that. They don't really do it justice, and I've since mostly fixed the damage from that. As you can see, the bars are away from the fairings, and the fairings aren't too badly damaged. You can see a little bit of scratches there, and then on this side is where the worst fall was. I mean, it literally went about 6 feet down a cliff, about a 70-degree cliff, and slammed onto this left-hand side and impacted there and pushed the bars up against the fairing here, or plastics. And also then the whole rest of the bike, was almost upside down, so it ran into some rocks here, but it's really not that bad. And it also hit down here. So, and I have some video of the damage of that before I fixed it. See if I can splice it in. Recently out at Big Bend National Park for the weekend, and I hit a pretty gnarly drop with it. And what happened was it came across a bad pile of rocks, and I dropped it on the right-hand side first. And it kind of, as you can see, is where it dropped here, and then here, and this was actually pointed towards me and a little bit higher up, so it moved this down, and then also contacted here on the back passenger peg. So what happened on this side is that, so like I said, it dropped on this side first, and it appears as though it broke the fastener where it ties in there, that single bolt, because it's kind of moves a little bit. I don't know if you can tell, but that's not normal. So it's I'm pretty sure it broke that bolt, and but otherwise protected the bike. So there's no sort of damaged components on this side of the bike. So that's good. Other than you can see a little scratch on the case there, and now that rubber piece is in contact with the case, whereas when you first install it, it's just got a little bit of separation. So you can see what happened there. Then moving, so I dropped it on the right, and then it actually slid down about a 70-degree cliff, about 6 feet, I would say, and then caught a rock, and it flipped it over to the left, and pretty seriously, with some serious force also, and it ended up almost upside down. So it was quite a flip, and you can see the results of that here. It came into the tank there. I got a little ding here, but I'm not sure if that happened during the recovery or during the actual wreck, and came into my bark busters a little bit, but the bars seem fine. Anyway, so it bent in the bar here. Obviously, you can see where it contacted. This is a little buckled right here. It also contacted here, and it looks like this was bent in a little bit, but I think it protected the case. And you can see where it contacted here as well. But mostly, I'm pretty surprised that this didn't just totally snap given the impact. But I don't have any experience with other bars, so judge for yourself if that's what you're satisfied with. It also bent my gear shifter, but I've since mostly unbent that. Surprisingly, this is the quick shifter module, and it still works. And it bent in my kickstand a little bit, but it still works fine. And also, surprisingly, this fastener here seems to be solid as a rock on this side, where it broke on the other side. So that's something to consider, I guess. But yeah, I found that the bolts that connect this piece to this bracket here, there's one bolt on each side, so it goes through here, and then the same thing on the other side. They had stretched and bent, which... that was kind of, I'm glad they didn't break, but that was kind of surprising to me. So I went ahead and I replaced those bolts with some grade 12.9, 170,000 PSI tensile strength bolts. The SRC provided originally A2-70 bolts, which is about 102,000 PSI tensile strength. So hopefully these higher grade bolts will not bend and stretch, and hopefully that means that the bars will better protect the bike. But even so, I was astonished. I'll see if I can splice in the pictures, but this bike literally fell off a cliff and was sitting upside down for about 30 minutes. And then we winched it out of there and it started right up. And this right here, and the gear shifter was bent also, but I bent that out pretty much. That was the only damage. And I attribute that almost entirely to the crash bars, because, you know, if these crash bars weren't here, or if they were a lesser quality crash bar, you know, my radiator is right there, my airbox is right there. And I could have easily destroyed that and ended my trip. But I just rode out of there and still had a good time. So overall, I would say these SRC bars are a pretty solid product. They're comparable in price to the Outback Motortech bars, and I think for good reason, because they're comparable in value. I guess you can decide for yourself, but I like them and I would recommend them.